Hey there, commercial construction coffee talk fans. Thanks for chiming in. My name's David Corson. I'm your host. I'm also the publisher and editor of Commercial Construction and Renovation magazine. This is what it used to look like. We're digital now, but digital August of 2021 was the last issue that I printed when I had White Castle on the cover. But this is 20. Let's see, what date is this? This is April 2021. Got Miss Julie Strzinski, Director of Construction Design and Entitlements at Floor and Decor. Thanks, Julie. You're local here in the ATL. And thanks for building that Floor and Decor up and coming. That was a great renovation of the Ingalls Shopping, the market up there. So I watched it all get done. Awesome. Pleasure having you on the cover. But this issue was 144 pages, and I always like to see where I was doing something. I was water skiing up on the lake, and actually it's beautiful out here today in the ATL, and I can put a wetsuit on and go up and do some skiing here late this afternoon before the weekend comes in. In my younger days, I used to ski all the way to December with a full wetsuit, and then it was about 2 months off the lake, but then I would get back on. But then, of course, I had kids, all that, but now we're back. I have a piece of land I'm building up on the lakes. But anyway, that was my skiing picture. So it was always good to see what was going on. But you know what? I love holding the magazine, but I'm digital now. I don't miss the printer. I don't miss the post office. I don't miss any of those guys. And it's been an amazing ride on the web. Just had another couple million people hit the website last month, and I don't know where I'll end up. We had 29 million people last year hit the site. It's just been unbelievable making the transformation from print face to face to digital. And I can't do it. Couldn't have done it without all of you out there. So thank you so much if you're in here listening to our episode today. So with that said, today I have a gentleman up in the great state of Virginia out of Richmond. His name is Ben Meyer, and he's with Siplast, and he is the building enclosure business director. Did I get that right?
Nailed it. Yeah.
Yay! Awesome. And the reason why I had Ben on, he actually works with the Department of Energy, and he's got a report that he wants to talk about. So Ben, say hello to our listeners out there on Commercial Construction Coffee Talk.
Hello. Thanks for having me on. This is great.
Yeah, no, pleasure. And what's the weather like up in Virginia? Is it, you're just above me, X amount of hours. So
it's pleasant. We've had an extended fall, which I appreciate. The winter's staying away for now.
Well, my trees out front, they're still kind of red, but the leaves, and all of a sudden we had a nice wind come in. I told my wife, I go, look, the leaves are going to be all over the place. So we were raking them last weekend. I said, oh, they haven't fallen. All we need is one good little storm to come through here, and sure enough, they're bare. But they're blowing all over the place. So
it doesn't happen slowly. It happens all at once.
Yeah, it happened. I told her, I said, oh, they're going to be on there till December. I'm like, no. I guarantee they'll all be gone by the end of the month. All we need is one good wind and a little rain, and boom, they're all going to go. So everybody's got their bags out in front of their houses and put them in the reused bags and stuff. So, but it's beautiful today in the ATL. And listen, we appreciate everybody chiming in and listening to the episode. So Ben, the way this is going to work is we do our interviews in 3 parts. You'll tell your story, where you grew up, where you went to school, and how you ended up where you are today. And then we'll talk about the last 3 years in your report, any lessons learned that our listeners out there might find of interest. And then you'll leave one positive thought or phrase and your contact info, and then we'll close it out. So with that said, the floor is yours. Tell us your story.
All right. So starting from scratch, right? I mean, so I'm from Cincinnati, Ohio originally. So I'm a transplant to the Virginia area. So I grew up in that area, in the kind of the Indiana, Kentucky, Ohio. It's very much one region. So I was born in Kentucky. I grew up in Indiana, and I lived in Ohio the second half of my school career. So just kind of working out my way around that corner. So I lived there up until about 12 years ago, and I think that's we'll kind of round it get to the other side of this, but all the way up into the recession, that's when things got weird, and we had to kind of start looking around for other opportunities. And I think that story has kind of replayed itself, but in much more compressed fashion in the last few years. So I think it's interesting. It's very circular, and the cycles have gotten shorter. So that's really led me to Virginia, but along the way. So I started in college. I started in architecture, So I'm an architect by
And where'd
trade.
you go to school?
Oh, University of Cincinnati.
Oh, Bearcats. Yay.
That's right. I always tell people, yeah, they keep one in the zoo just across the street to point to. So
Yeah.
it's not made up; it's real. It's just across. You have to go look at one because the mascot is an odd creature.
Yeah.
But yeah, so you went to the University of Cincinnati for architecture. So I spent a lot of time with them there. But I also, along the way, uh, in my architecture experience, what part I love about University of Cincinnati is that it's a co-op program. So after your second year, you're doing design in the classroom, but then every other quarter, it was quarters at the time, you'd go out and you'd work for a firm, and they'd pay you, and you'd have to do real work, and you got feedback on this is what the job I'm working towards is, rather than waiting. It was a 6-year program then, waiting 6 years to find out that you like this or you don't like this. So you get that feedback very early on. And I think it was
Oh, yeah.
fantastic. And it gives you context as you're doing your design work because it's very easy, especially as you get into graduate school, to kind of just focus on the concept and not, the idea of a building versus what does it take to make a building in real life. And those can be very divorced. And kind of experiencing both sides of that through school was incredible. But one of my takeaways, like through the start, after my first co-op, was that architecture is really a business, and the education of architecture is about art and design. And there was a gap in my mind. Like, well, if I'm going to be successful in architecture, I really have to learn the business side of it too. I can be really good at design. I could get a good job, but I could, you know, run that company into the ground because I don't understand the business parts of it.
Hmm.
So in parallel with my architecture education, I got into business as well. So I did a business minor in my undergraduate and then an MBA as I was doing graduate architecture in parallel, just because it felt like it needed the balance. Like I needed that context because in the end, especially pre-recession, most architecture firms were small practices. They were 5, 10, maybe 20 people doing most of the work, and there was a few kind of medium and large uh, offices. I think in the last 10, 15 years, that's transitioned a little bit, a lot more larger firms and less independent practitioners. But I think there's still a large number of those.
Well, in architecture, there's about 20% of the firms that do 80% of the business. And then
Yeah,
there's a bunch of small firms, 1 to 4, 5 to 10, that are, thousands, millions of those firms out there. And,
yeah,
they're doing a couple of projects, and we do an architecture ranking during the year. And I had an architect on the other day, and he just said the same thing. He went to, he went to architect. He did his MBA at USC, and he went to Washington University in St. Louis for his undergrad, did his MBA out at graduate work at USC in SoCal. And what he said was, when you go to school to be an architect, they don't teach you about, it's really not arts and design. It's about, you're almost like a project manager, because you got the architect, you got the developer, you got all these guys tied to the hip to you. And it's not just artsy fartsy and using CAD and BIM and all that stuff. It's it's a business. Whether you are the owner or not, you really are almost like a project manager, because you're there till the completion, until they turn the keys over to whoever the end user or owner is. And I thought that was really interesting. They don't teach that
no,
in school. They just don't. And I've been taking digital classes for the last year, and I thought I knew a lot of stuff about digital. I didn't. And you can teach an old dog new tricks. And the amazing thing is that I'm in this influencer group. There might be about 250 people in there on these classes, and some of these people they're looking at, and EBITDA comes up, and they're like, "What is EBITDA?" And I'm
yeah,
like, "That's your number that you want to be as positive as possible." And but just little things like that. How do you open up a bank account? Why do I need an EIN number? What are the tax implications? Why do you need a CPA? Why do you need all this stuff? Um, because there's regulations out there, and the tax man wants their money, and you don't want them to come knocking at your door, and all that kind of stuff. So but the bottom line is, you go to school, and then they throw you out into the real business world, and you're like, wow, this is not, they kind of missed this. They really should. I think in high school, they should actually teach people how to balance a checkbook. That would be an amazing thing to learn, about how to run something on a budget, and so I am right there with you. When you said that, I was like, oh my God. And by the way, I lived in Cincinnati. My parents are from, my mom's remarried, but my stepdad's passed, but he was in Dayton, Ohio.
yeah.
And I lived in Cincy for about 2 years. I lived at Fourth and Plum, and there was a building I had. This is before the new stadium was built. This is
Yeah.
probably like in the early '90s. Anyway, I had the view of the river. I could watch the fireworks go off when someone hit a home run at the stadium. And then there was this building called SNL Data, and it was an old parking garage that got renovated. So I had no walls in my apartment. It was like a big open studio. Anyway, one by one, I watched this office building get built, in front of me. And then when the my view left, I got transferred and I went to Louisville. And I ended anyway. But that's my story about Cincinnati. I've got very, very fond memories of it. I'll tell you when it was. It was during the when the strike happened and Icky Woods was doing the shuffle, and the Scabs were out there trying to keep the NFL going. And so that's when I was there. And but oh, Mount Adams and Skyline Chili. I listen. I could go down, down the list of all the things, but Cincinnati was a great town, and when I first moved there, I lived across in Covington. I didn't know where I was going to live, so I lived across the river, and then we moved across into downtown Cincy, and then I made my transfer. So anyway, I can appreciate that whole scenario of Cincinnati, Kentucky, Indiana. You're right.
Oh, one.
It's like one big metro area,
It really.
Yeah.
And,
So go ahead.
no, in Cincinnati, I'll pile on. It's great, but my caveat is now that I've moved to Virginia, it's great when the sun's shining and it's warm out, which narrows down the number of days. There's a lot of cloudy, rainy days in Cincinnati. That's what I learned moving away. I didn't
Yeah.
appreciate how much rain there really was.
And there's orange barrels on the highway all the time.
Uh,
Oh my God. I went up, I drove up for my sister's 60th birthday a couple years ago during the shutdown. And we drove up, my son and I, and we're coming in through Kentucky in the orange barrels. And I'm like, oh, look at these orange barrels. What's that? I'm like, oh, my son's name is Bro. I'm like, bro, listen, I've seen these orange barrels for the last 25 years.
they just
Okay.
move
They just
around.
make their way, they just move around, you
That's right.
know? And so anyway, that's my Cincy story. So um, well, let's talk about um, March of 2020. The roller coaster starts for everybody, in the world, basically. But prior to that, cranes everywhere, building, construction, low unemployment, no issues really with labor, inflation, and everything comes to a standstill. Oh, it'll be a couple of weeks. Here we are 3.5 years later. We're still talking about it.
Yeah.
And everybody kind of went through it different. I've heard over the last several years of doing my podcast, I've heard all sorts of stories. But the biggest thing is that people they found out more about their business. There's more to life than just work, and that they've become more profitable, more efficient, and that uh, it is some of these companies have had some of the best years that they've had. And I myself, look, I just turned 60, and I went through the oil embargo in the '70s, the recession. Then you had the '90s. That was just still high, high inflation, interest rates, and so forth. But then you had the internet.com. Then you had the housing market crash. And I've been rolling right along, and then this thing came upon me, and that's how I was kind of forced into becoming, a digital guy. But all along the way, I've learned so much, and I learned a lot during this past couple of years. So I'd like to know what you've kind of learned and seen out there, and from the architectural side of things, and then we want to talk about your energy report that you
Yeah.
had. That
And I'll kind of tie this into my transition from working in architecture primarily to the manufacturing side. That happened essentially in the recession in 20. It depends where you are, but it started in 2008. And kind of continued through. Uh,
hmm
but like that was kind of the same things. Things are moving along well. We had projects on the board. At that time I was working for a developer, so doing kind of design work, project management, and doing owner's representation. We would do design and then build. And we'd have projects, we would finance our own projects, and they were, laid out there. And all of a sudden, we had these, projects into the future that just wouldn't get financed. And, we're working, we're closing out the other ones, and these other ones, and the new ones weren't breaking loose. And you start looking around, saying, well, this isn't quite going the way I think it's going to go. And so that led me to kind of transition into manufacturing, actually doing owner's rep and general contracting for a manufacturer. And then I did that for a few years, built factories in the 2010, 2011 timeframe, and then got into really supporting the business side of it and re-engaging with the design community to help, really support products, help them specify. I mean, what you learn very quickly in the design is everybody needs to understand all the products, but they don't necessarily understand differentiation between them. When do you use this one when you have a certain problem? When do you use the other? So I got into that really as a result of kind of that last shift in the recession. And I see kind of you can call it the roller coaster, but the kind of that happened much quicker. It was a much tighter time frame. The highs and lows. It was more from an Ohio reference, more of a Millennium Force roller coaster. We went straight up
Right.
and back down.
Mm-hmm.
And so at that time, I was working for a manufacturer. Um, One of our sister companies that I work for now at Siplast was GAF, but primarily supporting the design community, doing education, helping them with essentially specifying and consultative selling. But I wasn't really selling, more the consultative side to help them understand what products they need, where do they go when I have these certain problems. And so we had this whole program around doing workshops and traveling around to folks and bringing them together. And that was the core of what we did, was really educate and bring them together and help and interact face to face all over the country. And February 22nd, I flew back from my last event in Fort Lauderdale, and I had another one I think in 2 weeks in the Seattle area. And if you don't know if you remember, but at that time that was one of the first outbreaks in one of the nursing homes was in Seattle. And we're like, I don't know if that's a good idea. I think we might need to put a pause on this one. And like you said, initially it was well, give it a couple of weeks, we'll see where we go. And I think I was in a team of about 3 or 4 other folks kind of doing the same thing, supporting all over the country. And very quickly, we kind of came to the conclusion that we gave it maybe 3, 4, 5 weeks. And we're like, well, we can't sit on our hands. Our job is to talk to people. How are we going to do this? And it wasn't an order that came down from high above to say, hey, you guys need to transition into digital. It was more of a matter of, well, what is our core function? We were already a remote team that we actually pre-pandemic that we would get together on site to give these events and kind of wherever they were hosted at. And so we already had kind of the remote thing figured out. It was more a matter of how do we interact remotely with other people. And within a few weeks, honestly, because we had so much education content that we were doing in person, we just had to transition that to virtual. For that year, we put on just rough numbers, probably 20 or 30 workshops. We would do a weekly event, and I think we issued with the 4 of us almost 10,000 CEU credit hours. So it was more a matter of just transitioning quickly into how can we deliver the thing we want to do. In a different mode, and luckily for us, we had a captive audience. All of our customers were also sitting at home like, what the hell?
Yeah, they were all sitting at home. What were they doing? They were watching Netflix or the Ozarks or whatever. Yeah. Listen, I remember I was in January 2020. I had my 10th anniversary event in Jacksonville. I had the most people I'd ever come to my summit, and it was a great event. I was doing cocktail parties once a month to get local subscribers together. We promoted the magazine, and I was in Fort Lauderdale. We did a tour of a shopping center in Coconut Grove that was getting renovated. And then I was up in Milwaukee the second week in March looking at hotels for my executive retreats that we did in the fall. And Tom Hanks got the bug and everything. And actually, that weekend I was supposed to fly to Columbus, Ohio to watch the Buckeyes play University of Denver. That's where I went to school. I was a lacrosse player. So I was going to fly up and see my parents and then go to the game, and everything got canceled. Yeah. March Madness, everything, and but I was kind of like you. I was already working out of my house. I had a digital magazine that I kind of ignored. I didn't even really know how much content I even had on there, and then all of a sudden I was like, oh my God, I got like 25, 30,000 pages of stuff. I was blogging from way back when, and before blogging was even a word, and I kind of, from a print guy, I was like, oh my God, I don't know if I can do this thing digitally. I mean, I just like having the magazine and, looking at it and, are people going to, so I had I was fighting with my printer, and I said to him, I said, you want me to put this March, April issue out, and half the offices are closed. People are furloughed. They're all going to go in the trash. I don't even know if people are going to see it. So he's like, "Oh, David, you've been a publisher forever. You know economies of scale. It's once you set up the press, it's minimal." I'm like, "I just want to do a small press run for people that I know." He's like, So I bit the bullet. It was my wrap up issue for my event. So I said, "Okay, I'll throw it out." So the month of April, I kind of sat back and I was like, "Okay, I think it's going to go on longer than we have to make a decision." And my editor, my artist, like, "We have so much content. Let's just go digital.
Yeah.
And we'll just do a small press run for the, advertisers or people that were featured in there." And I said, "Okay." And then and like this podcast, I just had bought my mic. I was going to go out and interview people on the construction site on my travels and do these shows. And then all of a sudden I said, "Okay, I'll just start doing one a week." Now I'm up to 170 episodes. I don't know what it is. And anyway, and I was awful. I was awful in the beginning. People laughed at me. I didn't care. You just got to you got to take action. You got to make mistakes. I'm still not that good. All right. But I have fun and I'm smiling. So, but that's actually, kind of, and then we did the virtual events and we tried to do Family Feud. We did the Hollywood Squares. We tried all these different things to get people in. And then little by little, the country started to open up. And this year was my first year really back on the road, walking events and trying to see who was where and who's retired and who, and so it was really good to see people. And but I don't miss traveling. I'm a million miler on Delta. I don't miss getting on a plane. I don't care if I get on another plane and I've got my bracelet. I don't care. And it doesn't matter to me. But I miss seeing my peeps. And like next week's my last event in Scottsdale I'm doing, and I won't see anybody until probably February when we pick up in the year. But that was the biggest thing. But like you, I was already kind of set up. So the people that didn't turn on a dime that had to get everything set up, I think they were the ones that were hindered. But a lot of the people like yourselves that were already used to, like all the contractors that I know, they were like first line, responders, man. They put the mask on. If their project was deemed essential, they had to go to it. So they got in the car, they got in the plane, and they went out there and put their mask on, and they just dealt with it. And so I give all those guys credit that were troopers out there that did that stuff, just like yourself. But once again, if the offices weren't open, what are you going to do? Well, you got this platform sitting in here, and Zoom was it. Now you got Teams and Google, but I'm a Zoom guy. So, but without it, but the biggest thing is I remember having a conversation with a project management firm, and he said, "Listen, in one day, I was in Saudi Arabia, I was in South America, I was in Europe, I was in Central America, I was in Canada, and I did 2 walkthroughs in the United States. Before the roller coaster started, that would have taken me 3 weeks. Airfare, hotels, food. I can do all that in one day. Now I can kind of pick and choose where I want to go. And if there's like a punch list item that's a roof curb that needs to be fixed or whatever, I can just do a FaceTime with the guy, and versus me, or it's an hour and a half and on traffic, and it's a little thing like just do it. Where I'm coming from?
Yeah, what we found, even interacting with designers, helping support them, it would always start with a CU or some kind of formal event, and then we would kind of talk usually after an event if somebody had something relevant in abstract about it, and then it'd be a follow-up meeting to like maybe see the drawings, maybe see the spec. In this new format, we would do an event, we put up a calendar invite, folks could schedule meetings, and then within a day they would be sharing their screen and designing in real time with us. Like, so the distance that we had to navigate from interaction to execution, it collapsed immediately, and that's one of the things that I think should have happened a long time ago. We just didn't really have the kind of the overall understanding or commitment to try and to do it digitally.
And it's not going away.
Yeah.
People tell me, "Oh, I've done so many Zoom calls. I'm burnt out." It's not going away. It's just so much easier.
Yeah.
But I do tell people, look, this right here, the cell phone is your best thing you can have, because you can reach the 8 billion people on the planet, anywhere on the planet. You can have your contacts in there. You can do Zoom. You can do, CRM. You can do everything you want to do is right here in the palm of your hand. It's an amazing tool. I tell people, look, you should make 5 to 10 calls a day if you're going to make calls, just to talk to people on the phone versus, or if you want to do them on Zoom, that's fine, but just make the call. And it's an amazing tool. And but people are not going to get rid of this. The pendulum swings back and forth, but this is not going anywhere because people realize that they can just get as much done. But there are events or on projects that where you have to go out and fix something or go take
Yeah.
it. So it's a tool in your tool belt. Coming as a contractor, you can, hey, I got my hammer, I got my wrench, I got my wire clippers, okay, I got my zoom here too, and it's going to help.
And we had many, I'd say project follow-ups from educations where, the designer would say, "Hey, I have this." He would invite his general contractor, and he would pull, on site. So we're all on the screen together, looking at the same thing and marking it up, real time. And in order to coordinate that site visit, would have taken weeks, and they
Yeah,
would have moved on with construction, and we never would actually had the conversation we wanted to have.
yeah, yeah. No, it. I have some, but the people that weren't set up, that was the biggest thing is, okay, I have to buy laptops for all the people. Some people aren't built to work out of their home. You might have dogs, kids. Everybody was different. Myself, I had been doing it for so long that it didn't even bother me. It just it was a learning experience still because there were so many people that if you didn't have a cell phone, having a cell phone or if they had a Gmail account and because they weren't at the office, that was probably the most golden thing that you could have, in my opinion, into making it through,
Yeah.
as to the opening up of the country. Zoom is just, it's an amazing tool. It's not going to be going anywhere, and it's been a godsend for myself and everybody else, and including yourself. So, bridging that, um, let's talk about your energy report that you did.
Sure.
Give me the basics.
Yeah, and I'll kind of, to get from Zoom to there. So one of the things that, I think, I work for a company that's part of Standard Industries, and one of the things that they did well was, again, we were all well positioned to kind of go into this remote work, but we also, started seeing over the horizon to say, all right, what's the next step? How do we go from this to the next opportunity? And that's kind of how I got into my current role, is really focusing in doing less general design support and actually getting into with Siplast and trying to expand their business offering. So Siplast is known for their roofing, waterproofing, being I'd say consultant and specifier driven premium solution for roofing and waterproofing. One of the opportunities that we started to explore was expanding that into the wall space, because our consultants, our designers, we're designing both of those things, the roof and the wall. We just hadn't, as a general business, been participating in the wall applications. And so that's where coming out of the pandemic, we're still partially remote, starting to kind of move around. I started this, I'd say, business opportunity inside of CPlast to expand that premium consultant-driven roofing waterproofing to above grade air and water barriers, insulation. And so that's what I've been doing for the last almost 3 years now. So again, early transition into say, well, how do we come out of this? Where do we want to be? Who do we want to be when we grow up and people start going back to work? So we started on that early to get, our R&D folks, keeping them busy, but also having where do we want to go rather than just, hey, we're worried about supply and pricing, because that's where people were at the time. Like we keep, we're missing this ingredient, we need to qualify another. And that's not really R&D. And that was part of the challenge is, well, what is the next innovation? Kind of stepping back and then driving it forward. So that's what we've been doing for the past few years, was really taking the experience that I have. So I'm one of the board of directors for the Air Barrier Association. I've been on there for it's been almost 11 years now, and I'm part of the ASHRAE 90.1 Envelope Committee. And I'm currently the chair of the Envelope Committee for ASHRAE 90.1. So I've been for the last 10 years really doing that. When I say wall focused work in the background while supporting roofing and waterproofing, to be able to bring that to the forefront and then help to kind of expand our business that way has really been what we've been driving towards. And so your question around the Renew America School Grant. So this is something that we're pursuing, and it kind of intersects with what we do in multiple ways. So it's really focused at existing buildings, taking schools that are in need, not just older and needing renovation, but also in communities that may not have the funds to rebuild or to do retrofits. So the Department of Energy is part of the infrastructure bill that was passed. I think there's been a couple waves of infrastructure bills, but I think it was in the first wave. There's $500 million they set aside for Department of Energy and education facilities. So this first wave of Renew America's School Grant, I think it ended up around 150 million and they had an application process focused on, schools had to put together proposals that were around what energy improvements are they looking to make, and how will that impact their facilities, and what will they do. So they ended up, I think, accepting around 30 school districts across the country based on need, based on their proposals. And there's other rounds that will come out, but the goal is to spend that money from the Department of Energy by 2026. So there's a lot of money being flowed into that direction to improve the facilities, to improve the energy efficiency of these buildings, and a lot of that is, that serves the community for the next 40 years, because when they do the improvement now, they're not fighting that uphill battle about energy use, consumption. Their costs go down. So it's always, it's kind of the adage about when to plant a tree. The best time to plant a tree was 10 years ago and right now. So they're kind of in the boat where they can do it right now if they're accepted.
Air barrier. Listen, people don't understand. It's like having a little, your door, having a little area where air can get in. You don't know how much that can cost you in your electric bill.
Right.
Making sure that your seals on your windows. I mean, it's just basically general maintenance on any, whether it's your house or a school or an office building. If you do good maintenance, you can definitely cut down your energy usage or energy loss. Letting heat or cold air come into your facility, and you got to be conscious of it. People don't realize that little hole can cost you. It's like letting your sink drip, and it keeps
Right.
dripping, and then you get your water bill, and you're like, "What's my water bill? Is that really you?" But you let it drip all night, you could have a couple gallons of water in that. Now it doesn't sound like much, but if you're in a school and all the sinks, all the toilets, I'm just using general examples, but with air and being insulated, homes that are, I was in my when I drove up from my I went up to Ohio after my stepdad passed away a couple years back. I drove up and I helped my mom, get the house together. Anyway, there was a big storm that rolled through, and it started in Cleveland and went right down I-71 all the way into northern Kentucky. I was in there in June, and anyway, all the power got knocked out. So my mom's house, she was in Springfield, which was between Dayton and Cincinnati, off of I-75. Anyway, the house was probably, only a couple years old, but it was built really, really well. So during the day, it was like 100 degrees outside with humidity in June, typical Ohio weather. And I went to the Starbucks because there was no electricity at the house, but I had to run my business. So I'm sitting in Starbucks all day. But at night, we shut all the shades and try to do all that stuff. But at night we sat there in the dark and we listened, to the AM radio, which was brought back memories of when I was growing up way back when. But I told my mother, I'm like, it's not even really hot in this house. And she goes, oh yeah, the builder did a great job. Insulated. We did the foam, we did this and that, and it made such a difference because if you were in an older home and you didn't have electricity and it was going to be hot in there. I was
Yeah.
shocked at how cool the house was. It was actually cooler than it was during the night, after the sun went down, right?
Right, and that's what I mean. Especially when you control air leakage, there's kind of a threefold effect. Especially if it's an older building. The first one is if you control air leakage really well, is it's going to be more comfortable. It's going to be more comfortable in the summertime, especially in schools where they may turn off the AC in the summertime, for special events or things like that, or in the August season, or when you come back to school, it can be very hot. So you'll get a lot more comfort. So you're more positioned to learn, do those things. The other one is, energy efficiency, obviously, that you're going to save money and it's more resilient in those cases, that, you can have periods where, the systems aren't coming on constantly every time, the clouds come out. And the third one, I think, we used to be kind of the nice to have around indoor air quality, but like that transition, that was the whole point. Like that's the reason we have this funding bill, is it's around indoor air quality. So when you do a air tightness improvement, you also want to do HVAC improvements, because you're doing ventilation. You want to control that, because if you want to add filtration systems to your school for for disease control, COVID control, all those things, you have to do that in conjunction with air tightness, because if you haven't controlled that enclosure, if the doors are just open, you're filtering the outside air. You're not actually solving the problem that you look to solve. So those air tightness and HVAC improvements, like peanut butter and jelly. If you're going to do one, you really need to do the other. And if you you just improve your HVAC and don't tighten up the enclosure, the design is just a swag. Like there's a lot of, well, we'll put this in and see what happens because we don't know where it's leaking. We don't know how, and you may end up spending a lot more money on your HVAC system because the engineer is going to oversize it. He's like, well, I'm going to assume this thing leaks, so let me bring in a couple extra tons of cooling because I don't know what I got in this building.
Oh yeah, oh yeah, yeah. We have a lake lot, and we're about ready to break ground. And my wife's registered federal contractor. We do small jobs. Anyway, we're going to build ourselves. And one of the things I told her, I said, look, I want to have this house insulated, like tighter than a whatever example you want to say. I just want it tight.
Yeah.
I don't want anything getting out. And so I've been talking to some vendors. I'm working with a lot of my vendors that we're going to do a videography of the whole build over a 12-month period, and then probably feature it in the magazine. But I told her, I said, look, I'm going to be up there when they do the installation because that is like the most important thing, whether it's in the winter or in the summer. You want your house to be just like a lockbox,
Right.
right?
So yeah, it's a combination of the insulation and the air barrier. Those all need to work together. But one of the kind of I'd say it myths, but it's a reality, but it hasn't been translated to today. Is kind of this idea of sick building. Like, well, if I make my building too tight, I'm going to get sick. Well, that's where the ventilation comes in. That if
Hmm.
that's what we didn't do in the 70s when we kind of discovered this, is we tightened up buildings and we didn't change any air. There were no exhaust fans in your bathrooms. There was no, you know, air supply. So if you're exhausting air, you need to add air back in, filter it, do all those things.
Hmm.
And so like that's the kind of the modern equivalent. You really, in order to do a good HVAC design, be energy efficient, you need to build tight. You also have to ventilate it so that you're bringing in the air that you actually want to replace it with. And that's a myth or an idea that's it's really hard to dispel around this idea. Well, if I build too tightly, it might be a sick building. Like, well, if you've ventilated it and you designed it for humans to occupy, it's not a problem. But if you don't build it tightly, you're just throwing energy out because you're afraid, right? You're spending money on
You might as well spend the money and get it fixed than just spend money and waste it, right?
absolutely, yeah.
So
And
go ahead.
no,
No, I was
whatever.
going to say, where would someone find your energy report so they could, kind of find out, what the parameters are or what are the signs that I should do or how would they find it?
So it's run by the Department of Energy. So it's called the Renew America School Grant. So there's a lot of information if you just go to energy.gov on that website. Um, so those are things that I think it's a really good story of how we're using kind of I'd say these pandemic funds and that early chaos to really drive improvement where we need it the most. So these are schools that need the improvement and will benefit from that improvement for years. The other side of that is if you're not a grant recipient, does that mean you just kind of throw your hands up and say, oh, that's it for me? No, there's a lot more money still in that
Yeah.
infrastructure plan, and so like from a practical point of view, anyone can run this process. So like ASHRAE publishes a procedure for commercial energy audits, where whether it's a school, a hospital, an office building, you could essentially run through the same process and build your own scope. And there's a lot of other grants available or money coming in from the federal government from this infrastructure bill, and that will get so running that commercial energy audit will give you a way to prioritize because there's a lot of I call it fad technologies or things you're worried about, but going through that audit process will kind of help you identify the impact. Are you getting the return for that money spent? Is the money best spent in PV? Is it best spent in HVAC? Is it best spent in adding roof insulation? That process will help you kind of identify what the right order of events should be to get the most bang for your buck, whether it's energy, comfort, or indoor environmental quality, where it's filtration. So that's a really good process you can kind of continue through, whether or not you're on the list for the school grants.
Hey, listen, the federal government's got a lot of money. So, we're all paying into it. And even if you don't get the grant, there's ways. It's just, listen, the federal government is the largest contractor in the world. They've been building buildings for over 250 years. So the bottom line is, if you don't get the grant, there's probably some money there. You just kind of have to navigate your way and find the right administrator that can point you in the right direction. But the most important thing is just do the audit to find out what you really, really need, and then you go find the money. It's
Right.
not I can't do it. It's how am I going to do it, right?
Exactly, and that's on the existing building side. If you're in the new construction world and you're looking to say, well, I want to either design to the most current efficient standards. So ASHRAE 90.1, they think we just published a 2022 version. It hasn't been adopted by most places. It's in the process, but the 90.1 energy standard is cost. It's by definition it's cost effective today. So if you, and it's essentially future proofing yourself. There's about I think a 15% improvement if you just follow the current standard versus the older standard from 2019. Just by following that, you can get cost-effective, energy-efficient designs, um, and you can also use that as a tool. If you're looking to future-proof your design, a big part of that is when you do the renovation. There's going to be renovation in 20, 30 years. Designing with the retrofit in mind, it's very easy to say, well, I can save $1 now if I just design this building or I build this building in a way that doesn't allow me to maybe replace the roof without tearing the wall off. Which sounds like a silly concept, but we do that all the time in construction to save a few dollars and maybe it takes a week off the schedule. But we know that roof's going to need to be replaced in 15, 20, 30 years. There are many scenarios where you have to remove brick on the whole building to replace the roof, and that's not a very good design practice. Knowing that that building is designed once you want that to be there for 100 years, so design all the components, all the connections in a way that somebody doesn't disassemble the whole thing just to update the windows or replace the roof or add insulation in the future.
Hey, when my son bought his truck, I said, "Hey, do you know how much those tires cost to replace?"
That's right.
Okay, just little things like that. You know what your insurance is going to be because it's a 4x4. Do you understand all those things? Have you thought about that stuff? So,
But it,
if you're a builder out there, or you're an engineer or architect, and you're working on a project, and you had some questions, and they wanted to bump something off, yeah, how would they reach out to you?
well, the best way is by email. So it's my name, Ben Meyer. It's Ben.Meyer at Siplast Siplast.com. It gets to me, and then I can get you to anybody really in our company, whether it's sales, technical, or we just want to have a conversation with me as well. That's the best way.
So if you're out there and you're doing a new build or you're doing a renovation, it could be, a standalone, or you're part of a mixed use project or what have you. This gentleman right here is very knowledgeable, and he's in that enclosure side, and he might be able to save you some, let's say you have 100 stores in your portfolio, or facilities, whatever it might be, and you can knock off a few percentage points just by making a small investment. At the end of the year, it all adds up. So if you do have any questions, or you were thinking about it, or you didn't know about this energy report, go on the Department of Energy, look up the report, the school grant, and on the renewal side of things. And knowledge is power. And if you don't know, ask. And here's an expert that can help you. Correct?
I'm happy to help. Absolutely.
All right. So as we finish up here, it's now got Thanksgiving coming up next week, and then we're gonna roll into the last month, and you got Christmas, Hanukkah, Festivus, and then you got New Year's, and boom, this year's over, and 2024 is coming. So as we close out 2023 and we move into 2024, what would be your positive thought you want to leave with our listeners on Commercial Construction Coffee Talk today?
No build up there at all. No, that was good.
Yeah.
This is the holiday thought. From the commercial construction side, I mean, I think it's engage the manufacturers, engage the designers, as early as possible. I think our default is often like, well, I'll talk to them when I need a price on this material. And so many times, especially for what we do, we're the experts on our products, on the assemblies, on the installation. And there's a very good chance that if you're even in an early design phase, we can give you insights that can improve the performance and save money if it's in design. Almost hands down every time. But if it's in the bid stage, almost all of those improvements are going to cost somebody money, right? Because they have to change a drawing or they have to. So engage as early as you can, and I think everyone. I know on our side will be supportive to kind of help and provide insights and options. I think that always helps.
Engage everybody, okay, and do it as early as possible.
Yeah.
As we all know, the floor is probably one of the last things gets installed. So, but the bottom line is, whatever your project is, new or renovation, engage, and if you don't know, ask. Knowledge is power, and it'll just get rid of some headaches that you don't need to deal with, and you'll be so much happier in the long run. And so will be your client, or your that you're turning the keys over to after your punch list is done. And here you go, and another job well done. So, Ben, I have thoroughly enjoyed this conversation, and Cincinnati, and let me ask you. I brought Skyline. You could put Gold Star in there too. I don't want to not say them as well. But what was your do you do your conies loaded, or the
Oh,
spaghetti? Or
I mean, every time I go back, I'm always amazed that at Skyline. They don't even put menus on the tables. Nobody needs a menu that goes there. So
yeah.
it's amazing. So yeah, I go three ways. I do the cheese conies. I hold the onions. I'm not much for all
No,
onions.
no, I'm not an onion guy. I don't like the onions on there, but I like the cheese and I like the sauce, and on the spaghetti, load it up, but no onions. I'm with you, right?
Yeah, but the yellow mustard, the chili, oh, it's so good.
Yeah. Well, listen, for those of you who haven't been to Cincinnati, that's what they're known for, is chili hot dogs and the spaghetti. And if you haven't been there, they're really, really cool. And like you said, there's no menu. Everybody knows about it. Um, so with that said, a couple things. If you're out there and you're watching this, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, make a comment. We want the algorithms to find this and find Ben out there on the web once we post this episode. So we really appreciate it. It gets the word out, and we want to help people. Look, we're talking about saving pennies or dollars or tens of thousands of dollars, depending on how big your portfolio is of a property, etc. This gentleman's going to be able to help you. So hit that like button and hit the subscribe button. Number two, if you're out there on a construction site, we want you to be safe. We want you to get home, see your dogs, your kids, your wife, have dinner, and be able to get up and go to work the next day. Okay. So that's so important. And lastly, I want you to stay hydrated. Like, I'm looking outside. It's nice out. It's not hot, but you're still gonna, if you're working out there on the construction site, you want to stay liquefied. So make sure you're drinking lots of liquid. Put some electrolytes in there too. See, they're in there. And when you get dehydrated, you get headaches. That's when mistakes happen. So stay liquefied, drink lots of water or liquid, and I assure you, you're going to be able to go home, have a great, and you're going to sleep that much nicer, that night. So, but like I said, number one is we want everybody to be safe on the construction site. Okay. With that said, Ben, say goodbye up in Richmond, Virginia.
Goodbye, David. Thank you for having me. This is fantastic.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm going to say goodbye from Sugar Hill, just below the Beaufort Dam, about 25 miles north of downtown ATL. And everybody, next week, enjoy the holiday with your friends and family. Don't talk politics unless you want to and you want to get rid of someone. But anyway, don't talk politics. Um, Eat some food, relax, clear your mind, think positive, get rid of any of the negativity. Positive mindset is just so much you'll be got to keep your mindset positive. And enjoy the holidays, because they're going to be here and over before you know it. And we're going to be in 2024. 2023 has been an amazing ride. I've learned so much about myself, my business, and everything else. And 2024, hey, listen, it's probably going to be that much of a wild ride, in my opinion, because we don't know what's coming down the pike. Every day is just, I'll tell you, I get up in the morning, by the time I go to bed, I am so mentally drained of what's going on in the world. But, I've got my seatbelt on, I'm on the roller coaster, and I'm just enjoying the ride, and the sights are, and it's all been memorable. So with that said, we will see you all next time on another episode of Commercial Construction Coffee Talk. And Ben, I look forward to meeting you in person. Okay.
Absolutely. Let's see.
All right. Ciao, everybody. We'll see you next time. Thanks.